Hi, welcome to the YouTube channel Witness for Jesus. You're going to hear an audio of a conversation I had with a Jehovah's Witness, and it was the day after the documentary appeared on Channel 4 with Rebekah Vardy regarding the Jehovah's Witnesses, and we talk about that in our conversation. You're going to hear some interesting things that the Jehovah's Witness says. She claims, for example, that if an accusation is made, then the person is immediately restricted in every way. So, for instance, if they're a ministerial servant and an accusation is made, they're immediately removed from being a ministerial servant, and all their responsibilities are removed. And I do challenge that in this conversation. Now, I'm sorry, but I was a little bit tired during the conversation, so when I've listened it back, I think I repeat myself a little bit. And toward the end of the conversation, the lady decides that she doesn't want to speak to me anymore, and I actually get quite upset about it. And part of that is because we've had 3 conversations, myself and this lady, and the first 2 conversations were all based on scripture, which I'm going to upload. But it irritated me a lot, the way that she just immediately shut down the conversation at the end. Although it's something that I've come to expect with Jehovah's Witnesses, unfortunately. It's just no matter how respectful I am, they just want to shut down the conversation. But for purposes of showing what the current thoughts are amongst Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm uploading this. I'm pretty certain that this lady is married to an elder. Although she's not said that, it sounds that way from some of the things she said. Oh, and the other thing, if you notice there's a gap, it's because I've taken something out that's identifying. I've taken out names, and I've taken out things that she said that were identifying, maybe in relation to something she's heard or something. I just didn't want it to go into that kind of information. I hope you enjoy it.
Have you ever been baptized as a witness?
Yeah, a long time ago when I was in my young teens. But I've never been disfellowshipped or anything.
No. I just wondered how much, like, obviously, you've. I can see how much knowledge of the truth, but also of like born again sort of thoughts. I was wondering, how much sort of exposure you'd had. That was all.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, it's a very long time ago when I stopped attending, and everything. So it has been a long time. In fact, did you see that there was a program on last night? Did you see it?
I didn't see it. I've heard about it.
All right.
The brother mentioned it in the group. Yeah. What did you see it?
Yeah.
What did you think?
What did I think? Well, I just think it's. I think it's all very sad, to be honest. I mean, I do know a little bit about those things that were discussed in the documentary, and usually what I do, as you've probably noticed, is I focus on the Bible and looking at what the scripture says, because I kind of don't focus too much on maybe people's, like, what the problems that may exist in the Jehovah's Witness organisation, because the lady pointed out, well, the documentary pointed out problems in relation to reporting of child abuse.
Right.
And I think that when in 2017, I remember that being on the internet and in the news about Australia. I don't know if you've heard about that one, or in Australia.
There's been some court cases, hasn't there?
Well, it was what they called a royal commission.
Right.
So basically, it was in Australia. It was investigating all religious groups. It wasn't only Jehovah's Witnesses. It was, they investigated other groups actually, like the Scouts and people like that. So it wasn't only Jehovah's Witnesses who were investigated, but what they did was they asked the Jehovah's Witnesses to produce all the documents, for the purpose of the investigation. And they'd found that there was over 1,000 kind of alleged perpetrators of child abuse in the organisation of Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia, and that not one of those 1,000 had been reported to the police. Not even one. So what they did was they had actual kind of a court situation where they had people like elders and people like that being interviewed, and they interviewed one of the governing body. It was, I can't remember his name, but he's the Australian one.
Yeah.
I think he's called, what's he called? Is he called Jeffrey Jackson?
Jeffrey Jackson.
Right, well, he was interviewed by the lawyers as part of the Royal Commission, and the footage of him being interviewed is all there, like everything was recorded. At the time, you could watch any of the footage, when they were investigating any of the groups. And so it highlighted the problem of, historically, child abuse not being reported because of the two-witness rule. Are you aware of that at all?
I know from my personal experience about the two-witness rule, yes, I understand that. But I also know how an accusation can be made against a brother, and that would mean that he could no longer serve. So I do know that they won't, any perpetrators will not be allowed to carry on, or even, it doesn't have to be a perpetrator, it could be an accusation. They will not be allowed to carry on serving. I've seen that in my own experience.
The issue, I think, is to do with when it's a case of child abuse, that there are very, very rarely there is going to be two witnesses. There's only going to be the child making the accusation. And if the accused doesn't confess,
I know.
You have a very serious problem. What I think personally as well, hang on, the elders are not in fact trained in matters of child abuse, and therefore, in my opinion, the authorities should be informed every single time. And the reason they should be informed every single time is because the authorities are qualified in these matters, and they can maybe do like forensics and other qualified methods. It's not as though
I think that very much happens now, doesn't it? I think the branch takes over as well now.
I don't think that's the case, actually. Honestly, I think the case is that the instruction is to just ring up the branch if there's an issue of child abuse, not to ring up the police in the first instance.
But you see, some of that as well is, and we've possibly seen it in our own situation, right, where that is definitely down to the individual.
But it isn't, because it's a directive to elders that if they get a report about child abuse that they call the branch.
Yeah.
Right, but so that's not an individual matter. That's the elder being told, call the branch, but not being told, call the police.
I think you'll find that that's changed. Obviously, maybe it's had to, but I know from of old, people who've kept it quiet for their own personal reasons. They were not leaned upon to keep it quiet from the police, but for their own personal reasons. If they now jumped up and said, I was told not to ring the police, I know for sure that these people did not contact the police for their own reasons.
But what I'm saying is though, that there are documented cases where elders have not gone to police, but elders have known that he's guilty. And he may have confessed, and they may have taken judicial, they may have said to him, right, well, you're not going to have any position in the congregation, etc., like you pointed out. But it's a crime. It's not just a sin, it's a crime.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
And more than one person needs to be protected against such actions, without a doubt.
And I think that's where the problems arisen in the past. And I think there's an ongoing problem right now with it, because elders and people in any authority in the congregation are not criminal record checked.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, so when I've been to churches, right, because this, I mean, I'm not, like I say, I hardly ever talk about these things. It just so happens we're talking about it. But in the past, maybe in 2017, when that all happened, I kind of remember it, and I think, oh yeah, when I've been to churches, I've actually said, you know, right, where's your child safeguarding policy? Can you please show it me? And a little like independent church I went to, they immediately gave me a folder. They went, yes, it's here. And here is our child safeguarding officer. And this is what we do when there's an issue of child abuse. And actually, there was a church I attended that was a different church. And somebody mentioned that a child had said something, right? Now, this child had said something, I don't know what. But basically, that day, without any delay whatsoever, they called the police immediately. And the police came and got involved. Now, in other churches I've been in, there's never any situation where people are with young people who are not criminal record checked. So I'm not saying that it's commonplace. I wouldn't think it would be commonplace for an elder to have a criminal record. But what I would think is that, like, say somebody becomes a Jehovah's Witness in their adulthood, and then they do progress and maybe get, you know, any kind of position, there's no criminal record checks at all. As a standard procedure, and I do think that's a problem alongside the problem of the two.
Yeah, it's a good point. But you see, you're a mum, and it's our responsibility. So, for instance, there are many people that I've grown up with in my congregation that I know very, very well, but yet I will not let and it's not a lack of trust. It's on my back. When I went through the questions for baptism, I made sure I was there. When they were little, we had warnings that it is a public place of meeting, not to let them go to the toilet by themselves. But you see, I viewed that as my responsibility as a mum anyway.
Yeah, however, you know as well as I do, because it happened to me as a minor child. I was frequently in a car with an elder, or frequently in a car with a brother, or frequently paired up with a brother to go.
I wouldn't let that happen to mine.
On the ministry.
I mean that.
Yeah, but you see.
Even on the ministry, I would not let it happen.
But you see, that happened to me. But that happened to me. That happened to me.
Where were your parents at the time?
Well, you see, that's the problem. So actually, my parents were completely not there. But also, even later on, when my mum did start to attend, what I'm saying is there was plenty times when I trusted these people. Now, I'll tell you something. I'm talking from personal experience here, because I know of, basically, in a local congregation to us, there's two paedophiles that I know of. I know. Now, one of them is convicted, and it's been in the news and everything. And that person, I remember something happening when I was young, and it happened, and I remember, and I'm being honest with you now, I remember them strongly discouraging the mother from taking it any further. And it was a girl that this person had done something with, and now she was strongly encouraged to drop it. They moved him to the other congregation, and he went on to commit more crimes and went on to go to prison, right? Which proves that the original accusation was true. Now, the other reason I know is he was a Jehovah's Witness. Her husband was an elder put in charge of the youth, actually put in charge of the youth, and he got discovered with a young girl who was out of the congregation. I don't know if you know about this, you might do because word travels fast, but basically he was having sex with this girl and he was in charge of the youth of the congregation and ended up pleading guilty and went to prison. But the only reason he got actually found out was because he was found out in the act because somebody had reported things that they'd seen. So I think what I'm trying to say is that the problem, there's multiple problems, like the 2-witness rule being one of them, because they frequently say, well, we can't take action because we've not got 2 witnesses, which in fact I don't actually think is 100% scriptural, because there's an instance in the Old Testament where if a woman gets raped in a field, they don't require 2 witnesses in that instance, and that's clear in the text in the Old Testament that it's not, the 2 witnesses in that instance are not required. So I think the problem, that's the problem, so that's what I'm saying, and it's still the case that elders are not criminal record checked. And what about the fact that that guy who I'm talking about was not qualified? You know, he was put in charge of looking after the youth of the congregation because he was a relatively young elder, and he had no qualifications whatsoever, or there was no guidelines. If I walked into a Kingdom Hall tomorrow and said, please can I see your child safeguarding policy, there wouldn't be one.
Well, you're welcome to try, welcome to ask, but I know for sure.
Well, you ask. Why don't you ask? Because I'll tell you what, there isn't one. There isn't one.
So it's a shame. All this behaviour is abhorrent and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
It seems like you've had a bad experience. I know others have had too. But
like in Australia, it's 1,000. Like, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
1,000 people. And in Australia, they've not even got that many witnesses. I mean, you know, they've not got 1 million. There's not like 1 million witnesses in Australia. There's only something like, I don't know exactly how many, but I know it's something like maybe 200,000 or something.
But I know from my personal experience, I know bad things happen because the organisation itself does not claim to be infallible. But I also know from my personal experience as a mum, I know from my personal experience I do feel safe, but that does not mean in any way that I take liberties. I know that my husband at times has said that he's been working with a new vulnerable young brother, and he'll say to me, make sure you're always around all the time, so that there are no accusations made against my husband, but also just to protect everyone involved. So I never used to go too far ahead on the door-to-door work without them being nearby, just so that everyone involved could feel safe and secure.
But you know that, like, going back a couple of decades, I mean, going back to, well, more than that, going back to the 80s and 90s maybe, this wasn't...
We no longer have a presiding overseer or anything like that. We no longer have a congregation overseer because they could see that there's too much responsibility on one brother. Now it's much more close to what the Bible has, where there is a body of elders. I
think the problem is, right, that the organisation as a whole has clearly said that they will not change the 2-witness rule because they're trying to claim it's scriptural, which I dispute. And that means, as a result, it means that you're always going to get a case where an accusation has been made and action is not taken because they're saying you've not got 2 witnesses. And it can happen in places like in the USA, where in some states in the USA it's the law that you must report it. And in those states...
There's 2 things we're talking about here, Dawn, right? So say if somebody came up now, the 2-witness rule was used,
Yeah.
The brother would already lose any privileges because of the accusation, and the police would be encouraged to be called, and that's how it's dealt with now.
Well, who encourage? What I'm trying to say to you is that in certain places, where it's not the law to report it, in other words, there's no mandatory reporting, right? Mm-hmm. The official stance in writing is that you call the branch, and it all depends what the branch says. Now, that's not... People who object to this situation simply say that you should have criminal record checks, you should have a child safeguarding policy in place, and you should have a policy to always report no matter what. Now, there are still instances where if it's not the law to report, it may not be reported. And it's like, because of that, people still have a problem with it. That's if it comes to that issue in terms of Jehovah's Witnesses, I think that's all people are asking is, why don't you just have a blanket statement that because you're not qualified in child abuse, those elders, why don't you just have a blanket policy that the elder himself who involved reports it?
But you see, is it not better if it comes from the person itself who's...
Well, yes, I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, the elder, this is what's happened in the past, is that a minor child has reported it to a trusted person, maybe an elder, and that elder has questioned the accused, and it's all been hushed up. And this is what happened with this Rebekah woman on that documentary, and it's happened to lots of other people, where she said she was told, she told them what had happened, and it was inferred that she had committed a sin. You know.
But from what I've read, the person who attacked her wasn't a witness, so why would the elders have been involved at all?
No, I don't know, because I watched it. When I watched it, if I'm honest, I don't know, I can't remember whether they said it was a witness or not a witness, but regardless, at the end of the day, she's saying that she went to them for help, and they basically inferred that she'd actually sinned. She was guilty of sexual sin, rather than saying, you know, this is a crime. Somebody has committed a crime against you and groomed you and all that. Because as we know, people who are young may think that they've agreed to it. But they've not, because they're under the age. They've not agreed to it because they're under the age of consent.
Exactly. I get that. That brother was disciplined because it had happened before. So without a doubt, he was disciplined. We heard of that. That would be a factor in it. So we're only hearing one
side of the story. So what's your point though? Because I'm referring to somebody who was sexually abused.
Right, okay. But you see, we're only hearing her version of the elder. She said the elder said this.
Right, she was at law, but she was a minor child. That's what I'm trying to say to you.
So
but this is what I'm trying to say, is that you can't getting something off another similar age person is not the same scenario.
No, what I'm trying to say is we're only hearing what she wants us to hear at the moment. I didn't want...
Yeah, but you're saying that action was only taken because he'd done it before?
No, they would have kept information
had he denied it, and had you not got any evidence, they wouldn't have taken any action because they didn't have two witnesses.
We didn't have any evidence.
Exactly, but because he'd done it before, they're taking the verbal witness of both. But if it was just her witness alone, he would say no. If he said no, I didn't do it, they wouldn't have taken action because of the two witness rule.
He wouldn't have been able to serve it anyway.
No, but they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. They have said that they will not change the two witness rule, and the two witness rule is that there has to be two witnesses. If you've only got one witness and it's your word against them, then they don't take action. And plus, that wasn't an actual issue of actual physical assault either. It was even more likely.
What I'm trying to say is, I think we only are hearing in the media her version of. Now, from what she's so far put, she, the person that attacked her, touched her, whatever, was not a witness.
Right.
In which case, I am surprised she even went to the elders, because they would have no real jurisdiction apart from speaking to her.
Yeah, so I don't know, because I'd have to look that up. However, the point is, you're missing the point, because you're talking about one person, Rebekah, who you're saying, oh, she only wants us to hear what she... I'm talking about actual documented proof in documents in Australia of documented 1,000 cases. And I'm talking about documented cases all over the world that have been read out in court, and witnesses have been heard in court in America, in everywhere. I mean, there's been multiple cases in America, and in Canada there's a class action lawsuit. Class action means that you've got multiple victims. You've got 20 plus victims in Canada, all taking the organisation to court, because they are saying that this was an organisational error, not just one mistake by one person. This is organisation wide, and this is because of the 2 witness rule, and because of the lack of child safeguarding policy, and the lack of criminal record checking, and the lack of training with elders to actually train them to deal with this kind of thing.
Well, if he's saying, I too believe that there have been still mistakes made. Is the organisation completely walked with all this? No, I don't. But I'm sorry, Dawn. This conversation is going to have to end, because I do not have to see it like that. And if you have been baptised as one of Jehovah's people in the past, there's a different responsibility on you.
So you don't want to talk about the scriptures anymore just because we've had this conversation?
No, it's not about that. If you really do want to know how Jehovah's Witnesses, wise for you to speak to some of the local elders who know you better.
I don't want to speak to the local elders, really.
Well, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry it's ended like this, but I don't want to carry on this conversation.
Well, I'm not going to carry on talking about an issue or regarding this particular issue if you don't want to. I assumed that this conversation was going to be about the Bible and about that stuff we talked about before, which I'd said to you, if you wanted to, you could just tell me purely what your scriptural...
And I've done all that research, but I want to end this conversation, Dawn, because it is negative and there is more of a responsibility.
I've just said, though, that I would be happy to drop that topic. It only came up because of that programme that was on last night.
I know.
So are you afraid of a conversation with me? What is it?
I'm not afraid of it. I am not afraid.
Well, what's the issue then? I mean, if we're just going to talk about the Bible and not talk about organisational issues.
My issue now is there is more of a responsibility from you if you have been baptised in the past.
Oh, so because you asked me at the beginning of the conversation, had I been baptised?
Mm-hmm.
So you're now suggesting that I'm somebody to be shunned?
No, I don't. I've not said that at all.
Well, you are, though. You're choosing to shun me now. You were happy to talk about the Bible with me, but now you know I've been baptised in the past, you want to just drop me.
But as a measure of responsibility comes with it, that's all.
Well, you just want to drop me. You don't want to explain any of the teachings like I asked, but you just want to drop me because I actually was baptised when I was a minor child.
Okay. It's the way.
So somebody who's a minor child, who's like 11 years old or something, it's fine to have them make a long-term decision for the rest of their days. And if they should ever want to talk to a Jehovah's Witness about it, then the Jehovah's Witness will say, well, no, you made that decision when you was 11 years old, and now I don't want to talk to you because you've made that decision, and that's the consequences of your decision.
I'm sorry that's how it feels, Dawn.
It is exactly how it is, actually. And it's very upsetting because, do you know what? I cannot get a straight answer from Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm trying my best to find things out and to actually be honest in my investigation of the Bible. But instead, what I get is judged. And this is just typical. It's typical. Just because you don't like what I said about the witnesses and about the 2-witness rule and the absolute terrible, terrible way that things have been dealt with, which is factual. Right, just because you don't like that and you don't like what I've been saying, now you're going to just drop me. Yeah, it is quite upsetting, to be honest, yeah.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Dawn. Thank you. Bye.